Hey, welcome to another episode of You Ask, I Answer ADHD Parenting. Recently, I was working with a client and she came to me and says, Alan, I just found out my son's been diagnosed with ADHD. Well, not technically diagnosed, but he started seeing ADHD behavior at school because the teacher's been telling the mom how her kid's not paying attention in class, can't sit down, super hyperactive, list of all the things they talk about ADHD. So I just found out my kid had ADHD. What should I do? When that happens, and I was talking to her, I'm like, when you found that out, it probably hit you like a punching bag, or like a punch in the gut, isn't it? You should start feeling overwhelmed, confused, and maybe a little guilty that they haven't parented enough. And she's like, yeah, everything you said is true. And the reason I bring that up is because I've worked with enough parents that the first time when we hear our kids have ADHD, that's a very typical reaction. So what I want to share with you is actually, this is a new beginning. This is for you and your child to go through this journey together. If you look at it, it's really a blessing. For me, it's always looking at the problem, looking at the solution. And what that means for me is always looking at the silver lining. And the reason why I say this is because ADHD is not a verdict. It's not there's something wrong with your kid. It's basically a signal. It's a calling for you to understand what your kid's behavior is about. And it's not coming from judgment. Because most parents, what they do is they fall into fears, right? They think like there's something wrong with my kid or they ADHD, so I should just medicate them and take them to behavioral therapists. And the truth is that ADHD is not a deficit. It's just a difference in wiring in our brain. And science has proven that. Okay, so what that means is I'd like to invite you to think about your kid is not broken. It just means that your parenting just needs an upgrade. Kind of like our phone. Every so once in a while, we have to update our Android or iPhone or iOS. So you got to update that from your parenting perspective. So what I like to invite you to do is take a deep breath, because at the end of the day, would you reject your child? Hell no, right? So your child is still your child. They're full of brilliance and creativity and potential. So why not treat them like that? What I recommend then is, instead of seeing your kid being broken and needs to be fixed, maybe they're not broken. Maybe their operating system just need to be upgraded, just like your parenting. So first thing is get curious, not judgmental. Start observing with a different lens. ADHD isn't just about hyper or distracted, because a lot of these ADHD kids, I know this because I was one of those kids, because I was very sensitive. I was very emotional. I'm an empath. What that means, I take on a lot of people's energy, good and the bad. Of course, there's an impulsivity, right? I do have wild energy and I do have passion. What I'm trying to share with you is channel that passion. Instead of regulating, like don't do this, don't do that, help them channel it. And the analogy is like this. And you're still like, Alan, that doesn't make any sense at all. There's something wrong with my kid. So let me share with you this. If what you really wanted, it was an F1 pickup truck or F-150 pickup truck, and somehow somebody gave you a Ferrari, are you going to complain about it? Or you're like, yeah, Alan, I'm going to complain about it because now I can't, haul groceries. I can't put stuff in my back of my truck. I can't go camping, but you got a Ferrari. And basically that's what your kid is. If you look at different type of vehicles, that's what you got. They're harder to drive. It's a stick shift. Back then, I'm talking about older Ferrari. Now everything's automatic, right? So back then, it's a stick shift. They're very finicky, right? They break down a lot, but it requires a lot of maintenance. So what that means is, when it gets going, it is awesome. It is super fast. It's super fun to drive, and they win races. So what if you had that kid? And yes, it does require more attention, more hand holding, and more maintenance, but what is their greatness? Because if you look at it, we'll give you one specific example. Everybody know about Michael Phelps, and he's the most decorated Olympian in history of the world. It mounted, correct me if I'm 30 plus something gold medal, right? Did you know that Michael Phelps had ADHD when he was a kid? He couldn't focus. He couldn't sit down. He has so much energy. So the best thing that his mom did for him was take him to swimming. And once he found swimming, he was able to manage his wild energy, impulsivity, his passion, his emotion, and he directed all that towards swimming. And you wonder why he's a champion of the world. Now, this isn't just Michael Phelps. So Richard Branson also have ADHD. His brain is everywhere. But because of those things, that's a superpower. So here's the thing I want to reframe and rethink about your kid's condition. What if ADHD is their superpower, right? So your job, again, isn't to fix your kid, is to help coach them, help them find their strength, help them build on top of their strength, help them develop their strength, help them understand so they have that confidence. Whereas if you keep on pointing something wrong with them, you don't behave, you don't listen, you're always on iPad and all these negative things, they're going to feel like they're never going to be enough. So what they really need is they need strategies. Right now, there's lack of strategies, because the strategy is just tell them basically they're wrong. They're ADHD. There's something wrong with them. They're not like the other kids who can sit down and behave. That's the wrong strategies you want to implement with your kid if you want to do that. Because the strategy, if you did it that way, they're just going to be feeling sorry for themselves. They have very low confidence. So what that means is teach them to regulate, not to repress their feelings, not to repress their strength, right? Would you ever tell a Ferrari to not not drive, go fast because they're built for that. Teach them how to use that strength. Obviously, you got to regulate too because otherwise you're going to hit the tree, right? I totally understand that part. But the most important part, teach them the strength. This is their strength. Teach them how to channel their energy and not to shut it down because what most parents do, they just shut down. Don't do this, don't do that. You're going to hit your head. Like, why can't you do your homework? Why can't you focus? Help them channel through that energy. So what that means is example, like, John, you're full of energy right now. Let's take that power and use it to race on the clock on your homework assignment. Right? Let's do it fast and use it, channel that superpower, your focus, and really gamify. Gamify means that make a game out of it, make it fun out of it. Because the right parent approach can change everything. And that's exactly what happened to Michael Phelps. And the other part is exactly what I just talked about is connect before correct. Connect before correct. Instead of telling your kids what to do, like what they shouldn't be doing, because what they really want, if you look at development cycle, is what kids really want is they want to feel that emotional safety, because that emotional safety is the soil for all growth. I'm going to say this again. Emotional safety is the soil for all growth. And in order to grow a plant, what do you need? You need to have the right soil, the fertilizer, you need to have sun, you need to have water, right? So what that means to you is if you want to build that emotional safety, that your kids have strong regulation, they feel good about themselves, they believe in themselves, they have the confidence. First thing is you have to regulate your own nervous system first. It starts with you, because what happens is kids copy us. They model off us because we're their superhero. Whatever we do, they're going to copy. So unless you regulate your own emotional first, they're not going to be able to regulate their own emotional system. So what that also means is calm before their compass. So what that means is your calm becomes their compass. They see you because you're their leader, right? So the other part is catch them while they're doing good. So instead of catching them while they're misbehaving, because it's really easy to point out what they're doing wrong. So if they're doing something right, focus on that. Hey, you're doing this right. Keep going. Keep doing this. Because what happened is your mirror is also a management for their behavior, because they're going to copy exactly off of you. And the last part is your child isn't there to give you a hard time. It's because they're having a hard time. Your child isn't there purposely giving you a hard time. They're having a hard time themselves because their prefrontal cortex is not fully developed yet. Studies have shown that prefrontal cortex, which is the executive decision part, how you control your emotions, that's not going to get fully developed until they're age of 25. So the fact that your kid is 5 years old or 10 years old, 12 years old, they're still like ADHD, they're kind of wandering around, is because they haven't fully developed the prefrontal cortex. So with that said, stop giving your child a hard time because they're having a hard time. So what you want to do is connect before correct, help them regulate. So teach them how to regulate so that they can learn and be confident about themselves and moving forward in the future. The other part is the other parent that asked me, like, what else can I do? So the biggest thing is educate yourself about ADHD. Okay. So I'm a big proponent that medication doesn't work, because what happens is your kid becomes a guinea pig. So those of you who've been on medication, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. So you go to the pediatrician. Actually, let's start before the process. So the process looks like this, right? So the teacher says, oh, your son have condition of the ADHD. I'm not quite sure. So why don't you go see a pediatrician? Is your teacher qualified to determine whether or not your kid has ADHD or not? No, they don't. They never have medical experience. Okay. ADHD is something new. Medical doctors, a pediatrician, they don't even quite understand what ADHD is all about because they never learned that went to school. So then what happens is you take your kid to a pediatrician, and a pediatrician goes, if your teacher says he had ADHD, so we're going to give you an exam or a test. I promise you go score that test yourself, that survey, you're going to find out you have ADHD as well. They're like, oh, great. Now I have ADHD, right? So how do you get that? So does that mean everybody have ADHD? No. What you want to do is educate yourself. Pick up books like Scattered Mind by Gabor, Maté, one of my favorite psychologists and authors. Pick that up. Or The Explosive Child by Greene. Pick those up, educate yourself. Most important thing is these pediatricians. And then this is not no longer on pediatrician behavioral therapists because they've never been trained on the process. You understand? They give you a survey, you check all those boxes, then you're labeled as ADHD. And what happened is they start giving the medication like Adderall, things like that, and hoping one of these will work. And what happened is one of the other clients I've been working with is in the beginning it's starting to work. And then what happened is his son started having digestive issues where he wouldn't poop for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Okay. He wouldn't have any bowel movement for 3 weeks. That is just a condition for sepsis. If you guys know for sepsis, it's basically your body's going toxicity. Okay. That's right. You're wondering like they can't pay attention. They can't focus. They don't want to go out. They started losing their confidence. It's because they're losing their cognitive brain power because their digestion. That makes sense? So these medication essentially becomes your kid becomes guinea pig. Again, this is, don't take my word for it. Do your own research. Focus on what works for your kid. And what happens with the kid is become guinea pig. They try different medication. This doesn't work. They go on to a different medication or they go on a stronger dose. And then what happens is the brain becomes very dull. They're no longer ADHD. They're no longer hyperactive. It's like what that means is you're putting a lower octane on your kid's Ferrari. So whereas you're supposed to run 92, 91 or above octane, now you're putting lower grade. If God knows you put diesel into that Ferrari and you're wondering why that car isn't running right and it's slowing down. So educate yourself and also don't do this alone. Ask for help. Use IEP or 504 plan. So be an advocate, not a bystander. And the most important part is look for ADHD coaches because they've been through this. They're working with enough. They see enough patterns. They know how to help you. So go look for an awesome ADHD coach. And then the last last part is really focus on their superpower. Again, we talked a little bit about this already. Really focus on their superpower. God's giving you a Ferrari. Stop driving it like an F-150. God, stop driving it like a Toyota Camry. If you got a Toyota Camry with your kid, that's fine too. All right, so come to an acceptance. The most important part is learn what their strengths are, help them discover what their strengths are, and guide them through that strength. Why would you ever tell your Ferrari not to drive fast? Because that's their superpower. Or if you got an F-150, why would you tell your F-150 to drive 150 miles an hour? Because their cars are not built for that. Hope you guys are getting this. And I love your take on this. Subscribe to my channel. If you have more questions, put it in chat. I'll be happy to answer all of your questions. And this channel is really supporting parents because I can only understand the struggles that you guys are going through as an ADHD parent amongst everything else. So what this channel is really about, it's about parenting, it's about personal development, it's about work and living life and mash everything all together. Like and subscribe to our channel. If you have any questions, every Friday I promise to answer your questions. So put it in chat, put it in comment. And if you get picked, I will answer your questions and we'll put it on our next YouTube channel. All right. Until then, live purposely, love passionately, and be the most remarkable parent you can be.